Welcome everyone. Today we will discuss about Indian novelist D.F. Karaka. India is a land of talent, but instead of remembering them, we often forget them. D.F. Karaka is one of them, but he is not the only one. Either it is Cornelia Sorabji, Sajjad Jahin, Rasida Jahan, or many other progressive writers. We often forget them. But in the 21st century, there is a revival of several Indian writers of early century. Progressive writers like Sajjad Jahi, Rasida Jahan, Ismat Chughtai, Sadat Hasan Manto, and many others are well received by the academic world. But D.F. Karka remains unlucky. He is still unknown to the academic world. It does not mean that he was not popular among the academic world of 1930, 40, 50, 60s, and 70s. He had published more than 24 books, and many of them were bestseller, not for 1 year but for several years. If we look at his achievement, he is one of the outstanding person. He was hardly 30 when he sailed for England for higher degree from Oxford University. In the year 1933, he is selected as the secretary of the famous Oxford Union. Thus, he started his career as a student politician. This was the same year when King and country debate took place in Oxford Union, and the Union decided that it will not participate or not favor King's war. So they totally disassociated from it. And D.F. Karaka was secretary of that time, of Oxford Union at that time. There were famous politicians including Churchill, those who criticized the event. But Karaka came forward in defense and write one of the famous critique, Churchillism, that is against the ideology of Churchill, especially the man Churchill. And in defense, he also published one of his famous book, Oxford I Know. It is every details about the Oxford Union and the famous King and country debate. He doesn't stay here, and in the year 1937 he came back to India. And 2 years later, World War started. But in between the time, he became part of Bombay Chronicle, a famous nationalist newspaper that was inspired by the ideology of Mahatma Gandhi. He started journalist and had taken interview of Nehru, Gandhi, Patel, and other leader. Not Tilak, because he was already dead. This time around, when the World War started, he think about going to war as a war correspondent. Earlier in 1933 and 1934, he decided that he will not participate in any war. But instead of staying on his earlier point, he went to war and worked as a war correspondent. It was through the recommendation of Jawaharlal Nehru that he get a ticket to China, Chungking, to work as a war correspondent. He stayed there for 1 month in the year 1943. And when he come back, he published one of the most famous and successful work of his own called Chungking Diary. 1 year next year he went to China, and from China he went to Burma as a war correspondent again, and published with the 14th Army, another famous work of his. In between and during this time, there are several achievements to his name. For example, he was the first Indian, first non-white, first Asian, and first person of the world apart from British to be appointed as the president of Oxford Union 1934. He was the first person to enter in any concentration camp. First person means first war correspondent to enter in any concentration camp run by Hitler. He was the first war correspondent to interview a recently liberated Jew from the concentration camp. He was among the few persons who interviewed Jawaharlal Nehru and Gandhi both. When the World War happened, he published 3 novels during that World War time. First was Just Flash. Just Flash is the only type of novel by India during war. Although there are several other novels in local language, but in English it was one of the earliest novel that having all the British characters written by India. It is not the only at that time, but there were several others, but it was among those in English. The second, There Lay the City, is more about Indian characters getting engaged with the British character. It is one of the romantic novel, There Lay the City, that begins with that famous line, "She was in my arms long before I know her name." It is more like a Fausterian novel where Indian characters try to be in touch with the British character, but they failed ultimately by the end. Although they failed to meet with one another for a happy life, but they remember one another very nicely in their heart and try to be connected with them through the child. The third novel is more like a Gandhian novel, that is having theme where a Hindu boy get married to a Muslim girl, although that Muslim girl was a widow. In that sense, it is a type of novel where not only the remarriage but widow remarriage took place. Not only widow remarriage but the marriage of a Hindu boy with a Muslim girl. All things are happening behind the background of a nationalist movement led by Gandhi. If these are some things which we have to remember, but things never end. If we look at D.F. Karaka's career, then he was one of the most successful war correspondent of the Second World War. He published at least 5 famous works. Out of them, at least 3 were bestseller and successful. They brought him name and fame not only in India but also in China, Africa, and even America. In case of achievement, he was the first official Indian war correspondent in Second World War. He was the only Indian war correspondent in America 1945 when America decided to drop nuclear bomb on Japan. He was the only first war correspondent who entered in any concentration camp run by Hitler. He was among the first war correspondent to interview a recently liberated Jew. The problem of Karaka remains he did not stick to one career. He started his career as a student politician, and when he get name and fame, he left the place and come back to India. He was best in politics, but instead of it, he jumped into the journalism and become a journalist for Bombay Chronicle. It was a time when the student who get education from Oxford, they run towards IAS, administrative services, but he chose to be a nationalist of its own and more liberal than anything else. When he was achieving name and fame as a journalist, he decided again to change his career and he started to write novels, and this career was again successful. He wrote Just Flash, There Lay the City, and We Never Die. All these novels were bestseller. But when he was getting name and fame by the first novel and was writing about the second novel, he decided to again change the career. Now he started to work as a war correspondent. In this field, he was successful, but when he started to get name and fame and recognition, he again changed his career. Now he became a biographer. He wrote biography of Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Morarji Desai, and other person, at least 5 persons biography, and even Nizam of Hyderabad. That is more like a family biography of him. He didn't stick to the personal biography of people. He also wrote the historical biography of Shivaji, the dear leader of Maharashtra, and even life history of Hazrat Ali, not Hazrat Ali, that Nizam of Hyderabad. And thereafter he wrote his own autobiography. Then came Hazrat Ali. When he was starting to get recognition in the biography writing, he again changed his career. Now he became a editor instead of journalist and started his 2 newspapers. Both of these newspapers remained successful, and he recognized in Maharashtra, today's Maharashtra, as one of the earliest innovator of tabloids. He changed the style of editing at that time, but when he again was getting recognition, name and fame, he sold his newspapers. So whatever the time D.F. Karaka get name and fame, he just run away from the field. Might be personal reason or anything else. Yet, despite his unmatched talent, he is not reviewed by the critics. By the review does not mean that there is nothing written on him. There is smaller details on him in different books and novel criticism, stories, and even newspaper. But there is nothing academic, more academic on him, like a full research paper or a chapter on him. So when counting on these, I come to know about this author, and that is suggested by my supervisor, Professor Makrand R. Pranjpe. And then I started to work on him, and I wrote a full thesis, D.F. Karaka, and that is submitted in JNU under the guidance of Professor Makrand R. Pranjpe. Later on, one article that is published on D.F. Karaka as a war correspondent. It is part of a famous magazine or journal, Summerhill, that published from IIAS Simla. Thus, in case of achievement, novel works or other thing, we come to know that D.F. Karaka is an unmatched talent. But Today's generation is unaware about him. The reason is his ideology. Earlier, he is recognized as a leftist or a socialist. Early of his works, at least in Oxford University, one can present him as a socialist. Even his wife, that is Pita Karaka, was a British, belonged to a socialist family. So he has a root to socialism, and even in Oxford Union he was part of the left movement. Although after 1930s and 40 he is highly disenchanted from the socialism and he become more like a liberal. But before becoming a liberal, he was also inspired by the Gandhian idealism. He followed this tactic, and once he was writing about Shivaji, then chief minister requested him to write the biography of Shivaji, and he said that I am a Parsi and my point of view is totally different, and he said that I am not suitable to write this biography. But then the then chief minister said that you have a simple point of view, more liberal, and you are one of those who can do justice with the topic. So his things are recognized, and when we look at his journalistic career, either it is Morarji Desai or the Prime Minister of Pakistan in 1960s, the Prime Minister of India, or the earlier Jawaharlal Nehru, Morarji Desai, or any big name that we have, including Atal Bihari Vajpayee, all praised his career as a journalist. They hailed him one of the high-ranked journalists. Despite this, this name is totally forgotten. But if we look at how much he contributed for the development of journalism, then it is said that in 1970s there is one case for the development or liberalism of press, and it was against D.F. Karaka. He filed case, fought battle against the government and win it. And this case is known in the law circle as case of Karaka. He was arrested at least 6 times during his lifetime, like Sadat Hassan Manto, and all time he suffered a lot. He was sent into dungeon in the darkest corner of jail where rat smell and there is no exit of a toilet, no sunlight can pass, and so on. He suffered too much, and so many things of his biographical life are narrated in his autobiography. Then came Hajrat Ali. So he is one of those talent that we have to praise, we have to criticize, we have to find him, but there is nothing on him. Either Karaka was a good person or bad person. He was a good writer or bad writer. It depends upon criticism. But the problem is that there is nothing written on him. If we criticize him in negative sense, then there must be something. And this negative criticism will ultimately lead to the positivity. So, positive or negative, criticism must be there. It is necessary for the development of an author. If there is no criticism, there will be no author. Author write a book and give it to the readership, and the critics make it more popular. Today, William Shakespeare will be no William Shakespeare if there is no Samuel Johnson. Apart from this, we have several authors whose reputation is built by the critics. Earlier, we remember something, but later on we forget. But if something is written in book form, it will remain for a long time. So criticism is necessary if we want to preserve our writer. If we do not write criticism on the earlier famous author, then they will be forgotten, and we will stick only to some famous authors, and that would be monopoly of literature. If we want to break this monopoly, several other famous but unpopular writers must be brought into domain. In the 21st century, either it is Makarand Pranjpe, Priyamda Gopal, and many other scholars brought these themes, but there are several other which are out of the purview. So, best thing would be for research scholar is to find those author on which work is not done. However, it is irony that we run towards those author on whom work is done most. So the good service of academia is to find unknown author, research on them, bring them in limelight, give it to the readership, and this is how something new can be added. This is art of canon making. So today, this is the topic, D.F. Karaka, one of the most neglected Indian English author. So see you again sometime. Take care. Thank you. Good day.